Hi, guys. Welcome to the second episode of the Future Sports Business Leaders podcast. I'm Jadev. I'm joined by Matthew, Olivia, Robbie, and our new co host, Jack. Jack, you want to introduce yourself? Say where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Jack Adams. I'm a rising senior. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. Um, I go to Episcopal School of Jacksonville, and I went to the same camp, met all these guys there. And yeah,
And since this is our second episode, we're going to reiterate sort of the podcast goal. We're all trying to just provide a Gen Z perspective on sports business news events going on in these hectic times in the world, and we felt like a podcast really could help us convey those what we wanted to say. So I guess the first topic we're going to talk about is the Washington Redskins. Obviously, they've been in the news for the last couple of weeks, whether it was the name change or the recent allegations against the organization. So I just kind of wanted to gauge our thoughts on the issue, what we're sort of thinking about it, if anyone wants to start.
Well, they're getting a lot of heat recently, and unfortunately, I think they deserve it, especially with so many allegations. However, I was reading up on something, and Mark Cuban, the Mavericks, had similar allegations regarding the similar misogyny and sexual misconduct in that organization, and Mark Cuban had actually kind of called out to Dan Snyder to kind of accept what's going on and apologize and kind of have that sense of accountability. So I think it really is interesting to see that type of overlap with different sports, and unfortunately this happens a lot. It's society, but it doesn't make it right, and it's good to see that other people that had been in similar positions are trying to take measures to make sure that other people that do the same thing are accountable and know that their mistakes are not okay and their actions were not okay.
So I think regarding the name change, I think it's very interesting that the sponsors have gotten involved and that it's not just the higher management and that they are actually, from a business perspective, like incentivized to change the name or else they'll like lose their sponsorships, which I think is really important. And I think also regarding the other sports teams that have names that have somewhat of a bad heritage and like are not in good faith, like for example, like the Twins. I think that it'll be interesting to see if the sponsors and the upper level management in those organizations, if they step up and take the same actions regarding like name changes for those organizations.
And well, yeah, so moving back towards the recent allegations with Dan Snyder and his inner circle, I think it's good that I was watching Sports Center earlier today. And I think it's good that these major platforms are giving some of these women that are accusing of Dan Snyder and his inner circle. They're being given the platform to speak on their experiences. Like this morning, Emily Applegate, she talked for a few minutes on Sports Center about all just the trauma she went through working there. And so I'm just happy that they're being given the opportunity to speak on their terrible experiences.
Yeah, and I mean, also, obviously, we know that the minority owners are planning to sell their portion of the team through, I think, Allen and Co. So it'll be interesting who wants to sort of buy up the team. And I've read online that it doesn't seem like Dan Snyder's out the window. They're not going to force him to sell his stake in the team, but it should be interesting if the dynamic changes with new minority owners, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's very telling that they're trying to get out even at a time like now, where obviously their stake in the organization is probably worth a lesser amount than it would be at some points, because obviously as an organization, the Washington Redskins, if we'll call them that for now, are not in a good place. So the fact that they're trying to get out now just shows kind of how bad it is in that organization, and the fact that they would sacrifice probably a considerable portion of their cash. And it's also, yeah, like Jade said, it'll be interesting to see who will step up to kind of take that challenge on, because it obviously is a challenge and they have a lot to face.
So I think it'll be interesting because like there were beyond Dan Snyder, there were like lots of other people implicated in those stories. Just kind of see like how their careers kind of move on beyond this if they try to get future jobs or employment in the league.
And so moving on to new topic. So obviously over the past few weeks, a lot of NBA players have been arriving inside the bubble, and thankfully, from a fan point of view, we've been given the opportunity to see inside through players like Thibault, JaVale McGee. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts, Jada. Like, what are your thoughts and opinions on the recent like insights into the bubble?
Well, like I think it's really great. I think we all are under the impression there's going to be some documentary about. I'm sure NBA Films is filming the bubble right now, just trying to get some good footage for the eventual documentary that has to be made about this event. And I think that's definitely good to have these like sort of like they're gonna be like it's like time capsules. I mean, like 40 years from now, we may go on YouTube if it's still around, or we may have these videos of life in the bubble and be like and like kind of reminisce about it. So I think it's definitely cool that these players realize that they're sort of in the middle of history and are filming themselves. That kind of awareness is really great. And the fact that it's a part of player empowerment. Like they're taking it into their own hands. They're not letting like NBA Films do it. They're living in the now. They also, obviously you can like monetize this from a YouTube perspective. Like I'm sure sponsors want to be in like JaVale McGee's videos or in these vlogs. And I also have like another proposition. I think that like personally they should have an auction for where like you can sort of bid on a 10-day vacation. Like earlier in the year we had those like cool auctions where like I think like Drake offered to fly someone out. I think they should do something like that, but like you can make a bid to like have like a 10-day vacation in the bubble, because I'm sure there's a lot of super fans who'd be really down to do something like that. And you just give all the efforts to coronavirus relief. I think that'd be a really cool idea.
Yeah, I'm sure they might try to look at ways to get like limited, like small amounts of people maybe into some of the games or stuff like that if they can figure that out, like for charity or some sort. But I don't know, for the videos, like in the vlogs themselves, I think it's kind of cool. It's just like such an intimate way to see what's going on there, because we were like originally getting like all these like photos on Twitter and stuff like that of like the food there and like all these problems that are going on. But then like seeing the process that the players are going through is really interesting. And like I saw on JaVale McGee's vlog like today, Alex Caruso was like filming a commercial in his in the hotel room with like an iPhone. And so just kind of like seeing like their interactions with each other and stuff like that's really cool.
No, I think it's
And
just
it's just like from a
given.
business,
You go.
just from a business perspective, I think like, I mean, everyone, like all humans, they work off of emotion. And so the fact that you have the emotional connection with those players, even in times like this, when like it's so hard to even be around people, they definitely are, creating a base. Obviously the NBA has a great fan base regardless, but they're creating a base that's going to last even in times like this when it's really hard to just have that interaction.
And I think it's just given us an opportunity to like see vlogs. Everyone knows that Joel Embiid has, a fun personality through his Twitter and all that. But who knew that, Kyle O'Quinn and Mike Scott were just as fun and entertaining guys. So I think it's just a great visual, lesser known players and their like true personalities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kyle O'Quinn's actually really funny from his interactions there.
And kind of moving on to the next topic, it was reported on Monday by the Sports Business Journal, I believe, but Tony Stewart, a former NASCAR driver, announced his own auto racing circuit that is set to compete with NASCAR, called the Superstar Racing Experience. It's a short track focus, and it already has a broadcast deal with CBS, and it plans to start in the summer of 2021. And Jack, I just kind of want to gauge your thoughts on the new league, if you think it can be competitive with NASCAR. I mean, obviously we don't have a lot of details right now, but
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was a time to do this, the time would be now. Because obviously, like as we've seen in the last 5 years, the following of NASCAR has been been dropping steadily. And like they can't even sell out Daytona, which is the biggest race. And so I think if there is a chance to capture those fans, the fans that are leaving the sport of NASCAR, or not the sport, but leaving NASCAR in that platform to their own platform, I think then the time is now. And so I think there's a very good chance that they're successful if they play their cards right.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like I think it's gonna. Their goal was to like have each race be 2 hours. I think people do like that whole fast paced format. I think we've seen it sort of like with surprisingly like at least in LA, like F1's a big thing in LA, and that's obviously much more fast paced racing. So I think definitely making it faster, or sorry, 90-minute races. I didn't even read that properly, but I still the idea that it's short races, I think is a really great idea. And I mean, listen, obviously NASCAR is still strong. I mean, like they hosted 30,000 people in Tennessee this weekend for their All-Star event. So clearly there's a base who's willing to, sacrifice even their health to just go to their All-Star weekend. So definitely it's a tough industry to kind of find a new niche in, but I think this is backed by players, which is huge. I mean, sorry, by racers, which is huge. So I think there's definitely a chance could make some waves.
But I think also they could, if their product is as good as people think it's going to be, they could even steal away some of those committed NASCAR fans just because they have a better product. And NASCAR is obviously like a hard walk for some people, but for the committed people, if you can create an even more exciting product, then they're going to gravitate to that. So.
And so moving on to the next topic. So within the past few weeks, the NCAA has announced a lot of conferences have announced new rulings for upcoming fall seasons, including obviously the Ivy League shutting down fall sports, and then major conferences like the Big Ten, Pac-12 announcing conference-only schedules. So I was wondering, Matthew, what are your thoughts on these new rulings, and what do you think this means for the 2020 college football seasons?
Well, I don't know. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see. I'm curious to see because I know that they talked about a lot for the football and things like that, how it'll expand to some of the other sports. I'm sure a lot of them have been like slowly they're trying to come up with information for those. But what I saw was interesting, which is slightly related, is that a lot of like the top tier like Ivy League universities such as Brown got rid of their like some of their programs such as like volleyball and squash, like they kind of cut away those varsity programs and they're just intramural now. And I thought that was an interesting decision by them because it wasn't just for like this year. That was more just as a universal thing for the rest of and a lot of those schools, it's kind of just like it's a prestige thing to have those, but maybe that they were looking to like cut down some money and thought that those which aren't bringing in as much revenue were probably the ways to do that. So
it's interesting with that too. Like, Stanford cut a lot of sports for them, and like these are and schools that are doing this. I think Dartmouth cut their swimming team, and I know Brown cut their women's golf team, and it's interesting they're doing this just because I guess you wonder if this is from a financial perspective, don't they have enough in their endowment to do so, especially Stanford.
mm-hmm.
And all these Ivies are definitely well off, so I think that's definitely interesting to like ruminate on and why they would do so. But I think another like for football, I know Austin, but and for Texas, the fact that we're now playing conference, a lot of Texas's revenue comes mainly obviously basketball's there, but a lot of it is football, right? And so it's interesting to see how they're going to make this work, but knowing that they have to make it work or they're just going to lose a lot of revenue and chance to really bounce back from all of this.
And
Yeah, I think
speaking, go ahead.
I just kind of building off previous points. Like another huge part about the sports of cutting is obviously there's been some new rulings about like international students and whether they can stay in the country. So like that's why I've heard that a lot of like tennis programs at these schools are getting cut because that's a majority international sport, not. So I think that's also going to the reasoning behind cutting, and obviously I think that law is being either like I don't know if it's being changed, but I think it's being readjusted. So we could see
Yeah.
yeah, we could see a lot of these sports come back. But the college football thing's huge. I mean, that's literally the NCAA, and
Mhm.
if they can't figure it out, like
And I
that's
think
Well,
okay.
and well, yes,
Okay. Go ahead.
I'll say to speaking on like the loss of revenue, it's so many of these major like college football programs schedule these huge games so far in advance. Where this year Notre Dame and Wisconsin were supposed to play at Lambeau Field, and this was a thing that was scheduled, years in advance. And just like that, just because Wisconsin, the Big Ten announced conference only, can't happen anymore. And
I
yeah.
sorry, that's a good point about Notre Dame though. I mean, they can't
Mhm.
physically have a season. Like, who are they going to play? Like,
Yeah, Notre Dame being not in a specific conference, and if all these conferences go to conference only, what's left for Notre Dame? It's gonna be interesting to see what happens there.
It is also like crazy to think about how with all these conferences and with it being conference only and everything like that, just how that's also like not even football but basketball and everything like that. And I have a family member who's has to deal with like figuring out how to do this, and like with the NFL and the Players Association, they being so against playing. I wonder how that affects the college players as well.
And I think going back to the talk of like cutting sports, I think the fact that the schools with the massive endowments, and even like the big teams, like the successful teams too, like at Stanford, they had some very successful sports teams that got canceled. I think that is indicative of like a larger thing for college sports as a whole and Division I sports too, because earlier this summer my cousin mentioned he goes to Furman that they cut their baseball and their lacrosse programs, and I think Furman's obviously a smaller school with a smaller endowment, so it's more financially important for them to be breaking even on their and even like being profitable from their athletics budget. So I think the schools that have like the D1, the Division I like schedules and are traveling all across the country and flying and taking buses and just being generally like an expensive thing for the school. I think a lot of those smaller schools are gonna have to cut sports, especially now if in this year we're gonna be seeing like less revenue realistically from sports because less people are gonna go to the games. So I think that's gonna be a development that becomes larger and larger, just like schools cutting their sports, not all sports programs, but some of their sports programs.
yeah, and kind of just moving on to the next topic. We kind of dabbled in it a little before, but the NFL obviously they announced some plans, I believe, for the season if coronavirus continues. I don't know the full details, but I believe it's pretty basic stuff like wearing masks, traveling private, and then they plan to open up training camps. But I was just kind of Matthew, like I'm curious on your thoughts sort of on their procedure and if you think the NFL really can have a season or not.
Yeah, so there was a lot of like uh anticipation about the NFL is going to decide. They haven't really officially announced like any concrete plans, but they've made some things clear that like they're not going to have any sort of bubble like the NBA has or the NHL has been talking about doing. And like a lot of the things are going to be one on like a state by state basis, based on like what the government of that state says. And then also like all the teams are going to be like all of them will be practicing at their own facilities together as a team. They're have like given them kind of heads up on like what they need, what each team needs to do to institute like social distancing in the workout room and things like that. But as of right now, unlike many of the other leagues, they kind of have been going forth with this like mentality of like the virus isn't that big of a deal, or like it's not going to affect them as much. Um, like I've seen, at least in Philadelphia, they announced that there would be no fans allowed for any games until February at least, and which obviously the season would be over by then. So, and like the NFL's response to that was basically, in Philadelphia, you won't be able to have any fans, but if in another state, such as in Nashville, if the Titans are allowed to have fans, and they'll go forth with that. So they're really taking it kind of on a state by state or team by team level, as opposed to kind of doing some universal thing such as the other leagues, which might be good for some people, but I also don't know. That might also cause some friction among the owners and things like that. That might make it harder to get like a concrete plan going forth. So I don't know, but
It is like really interesting to how they kind of, because we originally, when the bubble happened, my first thought was how would the NFL kind of adapt from this and like learn from what the NBA is doing. But I think it's interesting the fact that there is a lot of, like Matthew said, it is a lot of denial of the situation going on, and like when they first addressed this season, they addressed it in March and saying we have plenty of time, but all of that time has just basically been spent. And so the fact that it's been basically 4 months or 5 months since all of that, and they're still kind of in that same position, and they don't really have a clear-cut plan, unlike the NBA kind of did, is definitely concerning. And we definitely see a lot of players, like D-Hop, for example, had posted something on his Instagram the other day, and it was just like basically saying how he didn't feel comfortable being able to play because really like the NFL has not thought truly deep into this. So that is 100% concerning. So also, transitioning to the next topic, the MLS has been deciding to kind of expand and have teams, switch. So Jack, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw two teams have play their first games this year, those being Inter Miami FC and then Nashville as well. And so like we there are a lot of MLS expansion teams, and I think from a team perspective, this probably isn't the worst thing that could happen. I mean, obviously, like they're gonna have to wait another season, but from the point of view of generating a fan base, I think that it's not a terrible thing, because if you're not fully capable and at your like full capacity, it's going to be hard to generate a fan base that's going to stay after that first year. So I don't think it's a terrible thing. And I think it just shows that the virus is going to have an effect past whenever it starts to go away. So it's going to be more than just a couple more months. It's going to have effects that last years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go, Olivia.
No, you go.
I think we had talked about it before. I remember last year when we were at the camp, a point of what we used to talk about was that the MLS, some of the profits is making, or a decent amount of it is made off actually expansion, like the expansion fee of creating a new franchise. So, putting that sort of expansion on hold is probably definitely detrimental to the league in some way, shape, or form.
But I think also, like, from what we've seen with the NBA and, all that kind of, like we had talked about, it's really interesting to get to know the players outside of just their skill, because players aren't just work machines, right? Their skill. And so that might be, if they do this right, they could really, kind of like Jack said, like they could really, benefit from this extra time and getting that fan base. I mean, Austin, I know, is still going to open up 2021. But Charlottesville and all of those teams have definitely been delayed a year. But it really just depends on how you market it. And yeah, like Jada had said, when we went to visit, she talked about the fan base and everything like that, especially in Atlanta. And so I think if they play their cards right, this extra year could be great.
And I think just generally about the MLS, I think that now is a very good time for them. Like they could experience big growth, just fan base wise, because obviously, as we see, there's like a void in people's lives with sports. And they're one of the few sports that are playing right now and like actively playing games. And so I think this is like a big time for them, because if they can capture some of that audience that's like looking for something to do right now, then that could be big. but I don't think they've done a great job of that yet. And maybe it's because people just aren't receptive at all to soccer, and that might be the case. But I mean, you don't really see much about it in the news, even though they're actively playing. So.
All right, so moving into one of our last topics here. So earlier this week, another development in the whole high school prospects going to the G League saga. One of the top prospects originally from the class of 2021 Jonathan Kuminga has reclassified into the class of 2020 and has announced that he plans to play for the NBA G League this upcoming season. And so, Jade, if I want to hear your thoughts on this and just another I think this is the third prospect in this upcoming class that is choosing to not play college basketball, playing for the NBA G League select team and earn a six-figure salary.
Yeah, it's funny when you say this class, because it's it's our class. It feels weird to say that when we're a bunch of we're obviously heading into our senior year, and these people are foregoing their senior year just to go straight to the league. I think at all our schools we have definitely athletes. Like at my school, for example, someone got drafted in the MLB draft this year, and like the year before that, they forewent their I don't know if that's a word. We'll see. They decided to skip their senior year to go play at the University of Kentucky. So I think that this is the new normal. When we go to high school, we see guys like these who are definitely going to the choosing to bet on themselves, take not work with the NCAA in some sense, and just go straight to the league. So I think it's definitely interesting, and we've talked about it before, but I mean the one and done rule's gone. Like people are just going to keep doing this. This obviously seems like it's the way to go. It's just a matter of when.
I think it's good to see all these different people like trying out other options as opposed to they were kind of like stuck in one path beforehand. They're kind of taking it into their own hands and kind of gaining more independence. It's just like competition is like best for everything. Helps the consumer, which in this case is the player.
All right. I think that's gonna do it for our episode this week. But before we leave, obviously the MLB is starting in I think it's July 23rd. I'm not sure, but just curious. Is anyone gonna watch? I mean, I'm pretty desperate for sports at this point. I feel like I may tune in. If it's on ESPN, I'm not going to be turning it off. So I don't know about anyone else.
No, I definitely think they're starting to air just like preseason games and just getting ready for the season. And it's honestly surreal, like seeing professional leagues like start up again after this 3-4 month hiatus. So definitely excited. Definitely gonna tune in.
Woo! Yeah, sports is back, guys. And before we leave, we're gonna have a guest speaker this Thursday, or at least we plan to. Rachel Jacobson. She's the head of the Drone Racing League, and if you want the link, it's going to be on our website to sign up, futuresportsbusinessleaders.com. Check it out. Great content on there. Robbie posted an article recently that was really good. I read it. So if you want to check out for speakers, previous videos, anything like that, just visit the website. Podcasts as well, previous episodes. And we'll be back. We're still trying to gauge whether this is going to be a weekly thing or bi-weekly thing. So we'll definitely have an episode out in the next 2 weeks. And enjoy the rest of your week, guys.
All right.